Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Odenkirk, for getting this squared away on bonus points.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Mr. Director, we have a unique time, kind of a challenge here. Go on to item.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest we have several members of the public, both here and in the regional offices, I think, or that have come for items 9 and some for 10. We could go to those and then come back to the other two later if we wanted to.
I think that would be what we wise. That's okay with the commission. We'll do that. Go to item number 9. And then we can jump back on the other ones because we have folks here and in our offices. So let's do that. Let's, Mr. Director, let's go to item 9.
Mr. Chairman, item 9 is notice of rulemaking docket opening, notice of proposed rulemaking and economic impact statement to add a new rule to Article 3 addressing predator killing contests. The presenter is James Odenkirk, General Counsel.
Good morning, Commission. I'll wait a moment for my presentation to load. This item is a follow-on from the Commission's direction at the Yuma Commission meeting, in which the Commission directed the Department to initiate rulemaking to propose a rule that would prohibit predator hunting contests in Arizona. After the Yuma meeting, the Department met with the Governor's office to obtain approval to proceed with this rulemaking. The Governor has issued an executive order imposing a moratorium on rulemaking and requires an exemption from that moratorium to proceed with rulemaking. The Governor did provide that exemption in this case, and the Department proceeded with developing proposed rule language and the associated rulemaking documents that are necessary for proceeding with this proposed rulemaking. What the Department is proposing is an amendment to R12-4-303, which is entitled Unlawful Devices, Methods, and Ammunition. The proposed rule would be an amendment to this section in the existing Commission rules. So the proposed language, and I think I'll just go ahead and read it so that it's there and the public can hear the language. What it would do is it would say a person shall not by any means participate in, organize, promote, or solicit participation in a contest where a participant uses or intends to use any device or implement to capture or kill predatory animals or fur-bearing animals as defined in ARS section 17101. And that for purposes of this subsection, a contest means a competition among participants where participants must register or record entry and pay a fee, and prizes or cash are awarded to winning and successful participants. Now, I've highlighted 2 areas because those are the 2 areas that may provide the most interest in terms of the scope of this rule. What we did in drafting this rule was try to limit the scope of the rule to those activities that have been generating the most public controversy and to not extend any further than necessary. So the definitions that are referred to fur-bearing animals are included here as muskrats, raccoons, otters, weasels, bobcats, beavers, badgers, and ringtail cats. And then the definition for predatory animals overlap with bobcats, but also include foxes, skunks, and coyotes. And then the contest. There are 4 main elements of what a contest is, and a contest must include all 4 of these elements in order to be a prohibited contest under the rule. So it must involve a competition among participants. The participants must register or record entry. They must pay a fee, and that prizes or cash are awarded to winning or successful participants. So the rationale for the rule comes a lot from what the Commission said at its Yuma meeting, and addresses concerns that have been raised over hunting activities that involve killing an unlimited number of animals for economic benefit. And the reason there's a concern from the Commission's point of view is that when there's a controversy over a hunting activity such as this is that it tends to weaken public support for hunting in general. And that's where the Commission seems most concerned is with hunting in general. As controversy exists over predator contests, there's a strong potential that this controversy could not only threaten predator hunting as a legitimate wildlife management function, but also other types of hunting activities. We've been seeing an overreaction to these kind of controversies where legislators around the country are looking to not only eliminate hunting contests, but eliminate the use of dogs in hunting, or eliminating field trial events with dogs. And so there's always the camel's nose under the tent type of situation where you have one problem and then the solution is to go much further than addressing that one problem. And then again, from the Yuma Commission meeting, the Commission was concerned about its public trust responsibilities to the citizens of the state, in that to lose predator hunting or any other form of hunting is essentially a failure to conserve wildlife for the beneficial use of its citizens. Now, there's been some discussion about the Commission's authority to regulate these activities, predator contests in particular. In the past, there has been disagreement over the Commission's authority to regulate contests, but if you look at the statutory authority, it's fairly clear that the legislature has delegated very broad authority to the Commission to regulate hunting contests. The Commission has the authority to establish hunting, trapping, and fishing rules, and to prescribe the manner and methods that are used in taking wildlife. The proposed rule to prohibit predator hunting contests clearly falls within the Commission's statutory rulemaking authority, as it is both a rule that establishes a hunting rule and is a rule that prescribes the manner and methods that can be used in such activities.
Mr. Chairman, Jim.
Sir.
Commissioner Davis.
One thing I wanted to point out too, I think, and enlighten us on this. The previous controversy about authority was based off of a determination of a body that is not a body that makes legal determinations, in the sense of they're not a court and they weren't the Attorney General. It was GERC. So we just clarify, and then the Attorney General has also opined on authority issues as well. So again, I just wanted you to.
That's right. You're correct, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Davis, that previously the Governor's Regulatory Review Council had an opinion that the Commission did not have the authority, but that contradicted an opinion from the Office of the Attorney General with respect to the Commission's authority. Unfortunately, the Governor's Review Council had the ultimate decision-making authority on the rule, and they returned the rule to the agency without approval. So let me address a little bit more about the Commission's rulemaking authority and why rules that address social concerns or public concerns would be within the Commission's authority. As I indicated, the legislature has given broad authority to regulate hunting, trapping, and fishing activity. When you look at the statute, the legislature has not expressly qualified the scope of that authority. There is a provision that talks about, well, the Commission can't regulate the magazine size of weapons. That's the only limitation on the authority. There's no other limitation with respect to like biological considerations or preserving sustainable populations or public safety. So the legislature didn't say you can adopt rules that are necessary to sustain wildlife populations. If that was the case, then perhaps there could be an argument that the Commission's authority is more limited. But here, the legislature has given broad authority and is unrestricted with respect to the type of activities the Commission can regulate under its authority. And in fact, the Commission has adopted regulations in the past that aren't biologically based, but address public concerns with regard to hunting conduct or hunting behavior. So, today the Commission's decision is whether or not to proceed with proposed rulemaking. This is the beginning of the process, not the end. If the commission votes to proceed with the proposed rulemaking, the next step is to publish the notice in the Arizona Register, which will begin a public comment period that will begin probably no earlier than April 12th and extend to May 12th. Then after the public comment period, the commission will have to evaluate the comments and make a final decision on whether to approve a final rule. At this point, we don't have a date for that. However, we have to include a date in our notice of proposed rulemaking. So the commission could either today give direction as to what date it would like to hold that next meeting, or you could ask the director to find out what date would work best for the commission. And so long as he's able to determine that date by the 22nd of this month, we could stay on schedule. So, and then after the commission does approve the final rulemaking, it has to go to the Governor's Review Council, and that will probably take 6 to 9 weeks. And any rule that is adopted at that point has a 60-day delay after filing with the Secretary of State. Under this schedule here, it's estimated that the earliest we could anticipate a rule becoming effective would be the end of November this year.
Mr. Chairman, Jim.
Commissioner Davis.
Question about the effective date. Is it also, as part of the rule, does the commission have the ability to say the rule would go into effect January 1st of 2020?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Davis, yes, you could have a later effective date. If you wanted to have an earlier effective date before that 60-day period, you'd have to establish a reason for doing so. But yes, you could have a later effective date.
Okay, good question. Commissioner Sparks, you have a question?
Mr. Odenkirk, I know lawyers like to give legal opinions, and I'm sure you're delighted to do that, but every spring I go down to Unit 36 on the Mexican border, the Buenos Aires Reserve, the Federal Reserve. Antelope are calving at that time. I go down and I shoot coyotes. And I shoot coyotes so that we will have a greater number of antelope the following year. Is this rule going to prohibit me from hunting varmints in the unit down there at 36 at all?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Sparks, again, going back to the definition of a contest, if your activity doesn't fit within the definition of a contest, then it's not prohibited. From what you're describing, simply engaging in predator hunting, which is an activity the Commission wants to preserve, it would not be prohibited under this rule.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brake.
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to ask a dumb question, okay? On my ranch, I have small groups of predator clubs come, and they cook out, their families come out, they cook out, and they go out and they have a predator hunt. And they come back in and they give ribbons, plaques, and sometimes small amounts of money. These are not huge deals. These are family deals more than anything else. They're really camping out. Would this type of activity end up being illegal?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Brake, I don't know that I have enough information, but from what you're describing, it doesn't sound like it meets all of the criteria set forth in a contest. It doesn't explain whether or not there's even a competition. It sounds like people are going out and they're engaging in predator hunting, and that there's not necessarily a competition among participants. You haven't described that there's any kind of registration or entry fee that's involved. So from what you're describing, it doesn't sound like the event would be prohibited under this proposed rule.
But if they awarded first, second, and third place and gave a $10 prize for the first place and $5 for the second place and $1 for third, then that would put them in that category.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ray, again, it's adding one more element in terms of the prizes for successful contestants. But again, it sounds like this is a fairly informal event that is a closed-knit organization that's involved in something that doesn't really have a formal registration or entry fee. So I can tell you that if it meets the 4 elements, it's prohibited. If it doesn't meet those 4 elements, then it's not prohibited. So again, from what you're describing, it may not meet the definition of a contest.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Odenkirk, I do have a question, and I'm not sure, I apologize if this is not the appropriate time. I'm not sure where we are in your presentation, but
This is where I'm at in my
Okay,
presentation.
Very good. Great timing. All right, just another bit of clarification, because this has come up before, and it certainly is bound to come up again, but I just want to be, ask you to make a clarification, be very specific, that the recommendation is going to narrowly apply to predator hunting contests. This does not apply to fishing tournaments, bass tournaments, big buck contests. I want to be very, very clear. Is that correct? This would narrowly apply just to predator hunting contests?
Mr. Chairman, you're correct. Again, the definition of predatory animals and fur-bearing animals does not include fish, so it would not apply to fishing tournaments. Big buck contests usually involve big game species that aren't included in the list either.
And that would, same would go with the big javelina contest, whatever they do. Same thing applies, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. Any other questions? Commissioner Davis?
Well, I think, and your questions are good. I think one of the other reasons, obviously, is that when you're dealing with fishing contests, you still have take limits. Same thing, obviously, big buck contests, you still, there's take limits. We're talking about something that's also outside that.
Agreed.
That
And some of
purview.
these fishing contests, you have the opportunity at least for catch and release.
Most of them, yes. But even if so, you would still be under
There's
the
a limit, correct.
limit, right?
Yeah, good, important distinction, thank you. Additional questions for Mr. Odenkirk? All right, if there's no other questions, I have a number of blue slips of folks that would like to address the commission, so we'll ask Mr. Odenkirk to stand by for us, and we will just go through these by the order that I've got them here. So first one I've got is Jan Engebretson, I believe. All right, my apologies. When you come up to the podium, those that are going to address the commission, we ask you to please start off with your name for the record, and then if you are representing anybody besides yourself, and it's we're going to have to limit the comments to 3 minutes. So there'll be a timer up here on the screen. If you please limit your comments so we can hear from everybody and in the interest of time. So go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Jan Engebretson. I've been hunting since about age 10 in Arizona. I'm not representing any organization particularly right now. However, I'm kind of nervous too. So I hunt predators. These killing contests, as they're being described, I've found them a way to meet other people with similar interests, get instruction, get better at the craft of predator hunting. I always kind of had an interest in it, but I got very serious about predator hunting about 4 or 5 years back. Bought 20 acres, started raising small livestock, goats, sheep, chickens, turkeys, lots of chickens, lots of turkeys killed by predators coming in the yard. That prompted me to get good at predator hunting. The predator contests are just an extension of that. It's almost like being a part of a predator calling club, but without the regular meetings. It's once or twice a year. I'll refer to my notes here. Well, my concern with this is the public outcry that's against this. Where are they going next after you get rid of this? Are they going to move on to a bass fishing tournament? Are they going to move on to predator hunting in general? Are they going to ban cat hunting in Arizona? Those are concerns that I think are very real. I think this may be a stepping stone for political organizations to move towards a ban on hunting in Arizona, one step at a time. The other question I have is who exactly is calling for the ban? Is it a political group, community organizers that are soliciting comments from the public and creating their own ads against it? I don't know. That's a question that I have. I don't know if anybody here has an answer. If so, please let me know. We've already discussed the other hunting contests that aren't affected by this, so let's see here. The other concern I have, these contests, I think they could be utilized by the Game and Fish Department and the Commission. I know a guy very well that is hired by the Game and Fish Department to hunt predators near Sonoyta, specifically during the antelope calving seasons, also in the areas where the prairie dogs are being reintroduced. I understand that a contest isn't a viable means of predator control in all areas like that. You've got landowners that don't want tons of people hunting. However, I think these contests could be directed into specific areas, specific hunting units, where it would save the Game and Fish Department money that would be spent hiring somebody to trap and hunt. I think at this point, before considering an outright ban, I think it needs to be studied further, see if there's ways to minimize the public outcry, perhaps maybe a ban on posting the result pictures on social media, having somebody designated that's running these contests to make sure the carcasses are disposed of in a discreet manner that doesn't create more public outcry.
Jan, and I apologize for using your first name, it's just easier, but I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap up your comments.
All right,
We're
that's
over the 3
about
minutes.
it. I know I was a little long-winded. I don't have anything further.
Well, thanks for being here.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate that. All right, this looks like Ricardo Garcia. Mr. Garcia, state your name for the
Ricardo
record.
Garcia. I'm representing PVCI. I would like to give up my minutes to my friend Eddie here.
We won't do that. We can take 3 minutes from you and 3 minutes from each just to keep us
I
moving
didn't
along.
prepare anything for this.
All right.
Well, counting on my friend Eddie.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. Dan Kells. Welcome, Dan.
Yes, thank you. Yes, my name is Dan Kells, and I'm representing PVCI, Phoenix Varmint Hunters Incorporated. Going to be tough to get this done in 3 minutes, but here we go. So my name is Dan Kells. I've been a resident of the great state of Arizona since 1982, and I have hunted, fished, hiked, and camped and enjoyed the beautiful diversity of our great land since I first arrived. I am opposed to any rule changes regarding coyote predator contest hunting. I come here today to speak directly to the members of the Arizona Game and Fish Department. I do so because it is you that will make the final decision in this matter. First off, I would like to thank all the members of the Arizona Game and Fish Department for what you do. The management of over 800 species of wildlife encompassing mammals, birds, reptiles, and aquatic life is a huge and demanding task, and I once again thank you all. And you, our game and fish representatives, from the commissioners on down, and more specifically you, the field reps, the individuals who are out there in the field day in and day out, from the low-lying desert areas to the mid-lying chaparral to the high elevation areas, the likes of the Mogollon Rim, the White Mountains, and the San Francisco Peaks. What is it that you exactly do? Yes, you are law enforcement. You do enforce our rules and regulations, but just as important, and maybe even more important, you are scientists. I don't think that I would be wrong in stating that most, if not all of you field reps have a degree in science. You are out there compiling data and doing scientific research to inevitably make decisions that will directly affect the wildlife management of our state. Ever since I have been in this state, there has been no limit imposed on coyote hunting Rather, there has been rules implemented to expand coyote hunting. Example given, non-daylight hunting hours in selected unit. The Game and Fish itself has engaged in aerial depredation control of coyotes in specific units. All these decisions were based on science, data compiled by you to ensure balance of the wildlife in our state. A huge example of your efforts lie not far from the very doors of this building, the Sonoran pronghorn antelope. Because of you and the sportsmen of this state, the pronghorn Sonoran desert antelope are now making a positive rebound. How awesome is that? You and I know that these so-called contest hunts in no way jeopardize the survival of the species. When out in the field, no matter where it might be in our state, it is rare not to hear the howls and calls of the coyotes sometime during the day. They flourish in our state, even within the boundaries of our city. I live in a very close proximity to the geographical center of Phoenix. I have coyotes roaming through my neighborhood all the time. Any given time, you can drive through my neighborhood and see what looks like something from America's Most Wanted show, with posters and leaflets on utility poles up and down the street with pictures of pets and cats and dogs with wording stating the likes of "Lost" or "Have you seen my kitty?" Well, unfortunately, we have a pretty good idea on where they are, and most of us accept the fact that this is just a reality of where we live in our state. We all know that there are unethical hunters out there, just as well as we know there are unethical people in all walks of life. As a member of PVCI, I can tell you that we conduct our hunts under the highest standards of ethical and humane taking of wildlife. We love our wildlife and deeply care for the continued existence of all wildlife, not just coyotes, for the future generations of our state.
Mr. Kells, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your comments. We're out
Okay.
of time.
I would ask you to use that science that you have acquired and not to make decisions based on emotions and what other individuals may deem as what they perceive as ethical. And I wish I could talk more, but I thank you for what you do.
We appreciate you being here. Thank you. All right. Next card we have is for Eddie Murdoch. Welcome, Mr. Murdoch. If you'd state your name for the record.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eddie Murdoch, and I'm here this morning to voice my opinion. I disapprove of just giving the antis anything, including the banning of coyote contest hunts. I have seen some of the anti-films these antis have put out and that depict coyote hunting contest hunts and coyote hunting in a bad light. Well, you can make a film to show or make people and or the public feel any way that you want. These anti-films that I saw were completely one-sided and slanted to make the hunter look bad. Absolutely nothing negative was said about the coyote. No antelope, deer, cow, or turkey moms were interviewed, and asked what happened to their babies. No pet owners who had lost their beloved cats, puppies, dogs, chickens, lambs, baby goats were asked any questions. No ranchers who had actually had livestock problems were interviewed. These one-sided contests, anti-films have been sent to county officials here and there, and from what I hear anyway, and these anti-films may have influenced these officials to ask you, the Arizona Game and Fish Department, for a ban. I find it hard to believe the Arizona Game and Fish Department would let emotional public opinion be the governing vessel that our game laws are based on. The state of Arizona has a great Game and Fish Department, probably one of the best, if not the best, in these United States. I like you all, even know some of you, and I'll continue to like this agency. You're all professionals, and you all know who these antis are and what they are about, how they will lie and twist the truth for their own purposes. Well, they even make a kid's happy reaction to his or her first kill of any kind look sick and evil to the public. Do not forget that their ultimate goal is to stop all hunting and fishing, heck, the killing of all wildlife. You also know these groups won't stop, and if you give them an inch, it will inspire them to try for a mile. I am a hunter, and I hunt all the critters that Arizona has to offer, big game, small game, game birds, predators, and also fish. I also fish. I specialize in predators. As you may know, but the public may not, predator calling involves the use of a predator call to make sound to fool the coyote to come to you, just the same as you use a turkey call to fool a turkey to come to you, or an elk call to fool a turkey to come, an elk to come, or a rattling lure to fool a bass. Talk about fair chase. This call, the predator calls are not magic, and fooling a coyote is not easy. They say you only see 1/3 of what you call in when predator calling. That means 2/3 you don't see. Using predator calls to lure the coyote in is the #1 way these coyotes are killed in these contests, and again, it's not easy. The impact the predator hunter has, and many hunters, it's small. Even the ones in these contests are small. Yes, we do fool and take some individual coyotes home, but we really only scratch the surface. I bet more coyotes are killed on the highways throughout the year than in these 1 or 1.5 day contests. To me, there really is no reason to ban them. I'm sorry, except maybe from the emotional public opinion standpoint. The coyote is not a game animal. As far as the North American model, in my opinion, some sections need to be reevaluated, like the part where it says you should derive no financial profit from game killed. The coyote is not a game animal. However, coyote furs, like the furs from all fur bears, can and should be able to be used as a source of income. This is one way to utilize something from the critter, since most critters don't eat the meat. Most people don't eat mice and roof rats killed in their homes either.
Mr. Murdoch, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your comments, Roderick.
Again, I am against just giving the antis anything, including the banning of coyote contest hunts. Please don't let the emotional public opinion be the deciding factor. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. All right. John Arterburn. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Commissioners, thank you for your service and the opportunity to speak today. My name is John Arterburn. I own Pinnacle Peak Ace Hardware in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm also part of the Arizona Predator Callers. I'd like to give you some information today on calling contest that my club has run. About 10 years ago, I had friends whose dogs started dying in Phoenix, Scottsdale area. They were being taken by coyotes, eaten by coyotes. 2 of them at the front door, 1 in the backyard, off the leash that my friend was holding, others on the Reach 11 Trail. Commissioner Davis, you probably know that area. Pinnacle Peak Country Club golf course, area where I live. And then my dog started having problems. So I started looking into this, and got a friend who's got a ranch in central Arizona, started looking into the USDA cattle loss report, latest one, 2017. In there, coyotes are the king predator. If you look at wolf, bear, and mountain lion, they contribute like in a single-digit percentage to coyote loss, or to cattle loss. And we're talking full-size cattle and calf. Coyotes amount to 30 to 40% of that loss, so they're huge. So I joined this club 10 years ago, and they're sponsoring a contest called the World Championship Coyote Calling Contest. Some of the things that are banned here are things that are brought into that contest intentional to help. So in this contest, which always ran at a deficit, we never made money, we always had to belly up and make vendors whole. You could not apply to hunt in this contest. You had to be chosen or offered up by another hunter who was in good ethical hunt standings. So this reduced, this registration process, it reduced the potential for unethical hunters. 5 things. Extensive rules that were gone over with all the hunters before they were left to disperse. A polygraph test was also part of the process. So the winning team, anybody, when everybody's take came back in and we looked at the data, looked suspect, like they were doing something illegal, they were submitted to the polygraph. And then random hunt teams throughout the rest were also submitted. When they came in and all of the animals' information was taken down, all those animals went to a 4-H club or a fur buyer. So those animals weren't wasted. At the end of that, after the polygraphs were taken, if everybody passed it, great. If they didn't, they were asked to leave immediately and they were banned from ever hunting again. We fed them a dinner. After the dinner, we had an auction. We'd have auctions for those in need. There was a gentleman that first year when I went that everyone knew and cared for a great deal because of what he had done for wildlife throughout the years. He'd contracted cancer. His family was being eaten up by the medical bills. So they auctioned off some of these calls and this lanyard. I won those calls and lanyard. I was given the address to his home in Utah, and I sent a $1,300 check to his family. I didn't send a $5 or $10 check. I sent something that was probably 6 or 7 times the cost of a rifle that somebody may have been given for that. And the other people in that also had things like that that they did for people. So it was held to a high standard. The people were polygraphed. We reviewed who they were. We didn't make money. Those animals went away, and we gave to the people who were in need. So there might be a different way to do this, setting a standard, just like there's many different ways to run a state, run a company, run a baseball team. There may be a way to hold it to the standard that we had there. You've got a picture up there of a cow that was killed. That came off a ranch that I help with predation. The very first time I went out there to take a look, I found 13 coyotes on that ranch. Amazing. I've never seen during bedding, when they're hiding during the day, you might see one every once in a while. I saw 13. Then in the summer when I went, I found this cow. I killed 3 coyotes during that time with my partner. We let the hunter know about it, or the rancher know about it. He was appreciative because he had wondered where the cow had gone. So we're out there taking care of wildlife, livestock, and pets, whether it's during one of these hunts, a group hunt, or an individual hunt.
John, we're out of time. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for being here. All right, I think we want to go to the regions now. We're ready for that. I've got one from Region 6. Jay, Ken, looks like either Eaton or Urton. Region 6. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
If you would, state your name for the record and then keep your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Yes, my name is Ken Eaton. I'm a former president of Phoenix Varmint Callers and a member of Arizona Predator Callers. I have been a 7-year member of the Hunting and Angling Heritage Working Group. And under the aspects of HOG, we run an August boot camp predator camp in partnership with Arizona Game and Fish. This is a nationally known camp. My first objection is to the terminology of calling it a predator killing contest. These are calling contests using fair chase rules. Okay. The 2 that I have been a member of, one was Antelope Eaters based out of Seligman. This one was timed to help antelope on survival rates. Game and Fish is involved, biologists. They take stomach content samples, they do DNA studies, parasite studies, and so forth. This makes that a useful tool of the North American hunt model. I have been heard that they declare our calling contests do not fall under those. The other one is a multi-club hunt that we put on between the various clubs. No money is involved, just who gets to serve the food the next year. And we have had Arizona Fish and Game biologists there, again, taking samples and doing studies. We would have had Department of Agriculture this year, but they were on furlough. Now, predator hunts are a tool. I remember Arizona Game and Fish biologist coming to us about 12 years ago asking us to harvest 5,000 coyotes a year to help the prey base. These calling contests gather the best callers, the best shooters, enable biologists to get very good samples, be useful. We do not waste the animals. We take the skins and anything else we can use. The thing about the calling contests, they allow us to target specific animals, specific species to help other species. And what we worry about with this, my club, Phoenix Varmint Callers, has a scramble hunt following the meeting every month of the fur predator season. We award little trophies. It's a $10 entry fee. These trophies are worth $14.95, and under your rules, they would be forbidden. They involve a fee, they involve registration, they involve a prize.
Mr. Eaton, you're out of time, so I'll ask you to wrap your comments up, please.
Okay, please, you are reacting to these social justice whiners, as I call them, in social media. This is not based on biology. It's just based on the fear that in the future will affect the big buck contests, the Bass Pro contests, and so on. You should understand, these people will not stop. If they get enabled, if they get encouraged, they will come back for more.
Thank you for taking the time. All right. Looks like we have several from headquarters now. We will go with Rod Boyle at our headquarters there in Phoenix. Rod Boyle. Mr. Boyle, can you hear us?
Did you say Rod Boyle?
Yes, sir. Is that you? Are you Rod Boyle?
He's very hard of hearing.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess. Really. I'm hard of hearing, and the sound here at the Phoenix branch is very hard. I mean, the sound here is not very good for my hearing. At any rate, I want to thank you for being here. My name is Rod Boyle. I represent myself. Because of my hard hearing and the sound system here, I could not make out what you wanted us to tell you. I hope I covered it. Apologize if I didn't. At any rate, my background is I'm a third-generation native of Arizona, and I'm going to go into where I live. I live about 1 to 2 miles south and west of the 101 and I-17 stack where Sportsman's Warehouse is. And I've lived there since '73. And when we lived there for 30 years, I never saw a coyote one in my neighborhood. And since about the early 2000s, today I see about half a dozen there a year in my neighborhood. And what I think's happened, what caused it is, in the early 70s, we banned the baiting system that animal damage control used to use. And then we went on and we banned trapping in the 90s. And the population has just gone through the roof. And despite the movement of people outward, the coyotes are urbanizing. People ask me why I coyote hunt. I coyote hunt because I can't get drawn for antelope and deer, at least the hunts I want. It's very difficult. It's impossible for antelope, and deer's getting difficult. I guess they finally got the feedback turned down. I'm not getting that feedback now. To me, I look at animals, they basically die in the wild from 3 things: disease, starvation, I'm talking natural deaths, disease, starvation, or they're eaten alive by a predator. With that thought, I think hunting is a whole lot more humane way to die. It's faster, it's cleaner. And because it's such a good, hunting coyotes is such a good means to control their population and improve the prey species, I'm against this proposition. I'm not a big contest hunter. I've done the antelope eaters hunt, and that's about it. I just go out and hunt coyotes when I want to. I don't want the pressure of having to go out there and do multiple ones. But, and Game and Fish has actually asked us to go out and hunt coyotes in certain units during the fawning species around May. Now, if a club has a contest or a group has a contest in a city or someplace for hunting predators, and they get coyote hunters out there hunting coyotes in October, they kill 10 coyotes. Well, that's 10 coyotes that won't be doing any predatory acts against the prey species. So, to me, what I worry about is where's the ultimate goal of this? Where's this going to end? What's the final solution to the people that are pushing for these type of agendas? I know PETA would just like to end all hunting. And, they're just going after us incrementally. I feel like we're almost a lobster in a cold pot of water that's been put on the stove and they turn the heat on. They aren't going to stop. Once they get this, they're going to move on to something else. The people that run these organizations will use another issue to pull the heartthrobs of people that love their cats and love their dogs, and they will use it to get money to finance themselves, give them great salaries, and it's not going to end until all hunting's gone.
Mr. Boyle, you're out of time. We're going to have to ask you to wrap up your comments. Your 3 minutes is up.
I already did while you're talking. So please, I'm asking you to not vote for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll go with Matt Francis there at headquarters. We have Matt Francis. Mr. Francis, if you would state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes, we would appreciate that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Matt Francis. In reading through much of the department's literature, it is clear that this commission holds the North American model of wildlife conservation in highest regard. It is also clear from the department's action in 1999 to ban wildlife killing contests that these contests are in opposition to the department's standards for wildlife management. You have all, well, by now you've all received my email outlining how wildlife killing contests violate every single principle of the North American model for wildlife conservation by varying degrees. I submit to you that the organizers and participants of wildlife killing contests are fully aware their actions are in disagreement with the public, and that is why they have held these contests at undisclosed secret locations. It is unreasonable to believe people armed with military assault weapons would be afraid of a few animal lovers showing up. The reason these contests have endured for any amount of time is because of the secrecy in remaining outside the public eye until now. I trust this commission is aware of the growing national movement to ban these contests. Upon learning of the perverse nature of these pathetic so-called contests, Americans renounce them, and the public opinion of hunters and hunting suffers. What happened to the passing of wisdom from the previous generation of hunters in the form of respect for all animals and the environment, what we would simply call ethical hunting? Slaughtering unprotected wildlife for cash, prizes, and selfies, then leaving piles of the dead to rot on our public lands is inherently disgusting. The science in favor of abolishing killing contests is clear. All we need is the moral compass of leadership to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Next, we have Gary Arbiter. Gary Arbiter.
Okay, well, I hope you give me a little, bear with me a little bit because I'm legally blind. And
Mr. Arbiter, would you state your name?
read, it's difficult for me to write,
Mr. Arbiter,
for me to drive.
Mr. Arbiter, if you would, please state your name for the record and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Are better, and I'm a member of the Varmint Callers Association. The partisan split in this country is huge, and people are moving towards socialism. And one thing we can be happy about is that this system pays for itself. And we have a system of management that you can count on paying for itself. It could be that taxpayers could be carrying the burden if things were continued to go the way that they seem to be going. And excuse me again because I'm having trouble reading. Some people think with critical thoughts and other people think with emotional thoughts. And these are people who live with, some of them live with mice in their home and they're not doing anything about it. And then there's other people that deal with the situation right away when they discover it. So we can be happy that we have a system that pays for itself, and thousands of people are employed by companies who sell products to us, and their jobs are on the line. As a group, the Glendale Varmint Callers Association is a plus to the community. We're working with children, we're working with disabled vets, and we're helping Fish and Game for various projects. We protect deer and antelope, and ranchers benefit too. Endangered and threatened songbirds travel through Arizona, and they're failing in numbers due to the loss of nesting habitat. Bobcat and fox, unmanaged, will prey on these endangered birds. The club is for families. Events are planned all year. We have camping trips, fishing trips, Christmas parties, and contests. And the contests are one of just many events that we use to pull the group together. It only helps the environment, it doesn't harm the environment. And I support contests for a group that it helps to pull us together. And I'd like to also point out that on a couple occasions, I've had my life threatened by people in the field. And I can provide you proof of that, and I can provide you names of people that did it. They were convicted.
Mr. Arbiter, Mr. Arbiter, you're out of time right now, so I'd ask you to please wrap up your comments.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. Last one I have is Mo Cersei. They're at headquarters. Is there a Mo Cersei that wishes to address the commission? Hi, good morning. If you'd state your name for the record and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Mo Cersei. I've been a resident of Arizona 46 years, been hunting in Arizona for about 45. I myself have been a member of a Varmint Hunting Club for 18 years. In that time, I've taken one trophy, what they consider a prize, in which there were, the coyotes were put in a pile to be skinned later and then prepared for sale. The sale of the money from our club goes towards our events, towards our barbecues and other stuff. In that time that I've belonged to the club, my daughter has won a prize there, trophy, or a prize, what they're calling, for a shooting event. You know, prize hunting and shooting is taken away. This will affect all of the hunters in Arizona. I just ask that you please consider this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Searcy. All right, that is I don't have any more blue slips. Was there anybody else here in attendance that wanted to address the commission on this item as a call to the public? All right, Mr. Odenkirk, was there anything else that you wanted to add? Or let me see if there's any questions from the commission or any discussion that we have.
None here.
None. I assume you have a recommendation?
Yeah, I'll just make one comment and then a recommendation. There was a description of a lot of different types of activities in the comment, and whether some of them would be prohibited under this rule or not, it's not certain. The department put together a team of people to try to develop rule language here that was most responsive to the type of activities that are causing the most concern with the public and with the commission. And this is the starting point of the process. The public will have further opportunity to provide input on the rule language, and the commission can consider that comment and accept or reject recommendations that are made. So I just wanted to let you know that this is the start of the process, and that the department has taken the charge from the commission and attempted to develop a rule language that is limited and restricted in its scope to address only the concerns that the commission has. And so I do have a recommendation at this point. It was going to be on the slide, but I can go ahead and read it, which is...
Mr. Odenkirk, before you go to that, I was just informed that we've got one more blue slip.
Okay.
We're going to go to that quickly. Who is this, Gene? This Stephen Child?
Good morning, Commissioners and Chairman. My name is Stephen Childs. I'm from California, but I first became familiar with Arizona when I got stationed at Fort Huachuca 20 years ago and kind of fell in love with the state. I've been hunting actively in Arizona for the last 15 years. Please bear with me, but I should be able to do this in 3 minutes. So I want you to understand that we understand and appreciate the optics of predator hunting contests and kind of how they've been really misrepresented. I understand how the uninitiated might be taken aback a little bit by this, but the misrepresentations have been pushed by two animal rights groups openly against all regulated hunting. Project Coyote and Humane Society have both said this on the record, and they also both have a record of being dishonest. Please bear with me. I'm not trying to resort to personal attacks, only just give representations of some of these incidents. So Camilla Fox, without proof, several years ago in Marin County, accused the Marin Ag Commissioner without proof of illegally using traps and poisons after they were banned. And this was all to try to push the USD out of Marin County, and it worked. Eventually they got the USD out of Marin County, so they kind of learned that this tactic of misrepresenting to kind of get the public worked up is a common tool used by some of these groups. Camilla Fox also claims that the Marin Livestock and Protection Program is a model of success. And the reason why I bring this up is there's been a 15-year review of that program done by Robert Tim and Stephanie Larson out of a UC system, and they found that the model was detrimental to both wildlife and the ranching community in Marin County. It will be published in the fall and for peer review. It's already been accepted. On some of the science, canid biologist Dr. Eric Gies, a well-known and well-respected canid biologist, had said the claims of Humane Society and Project Coyote are oversimplified and unproven. That's kind of what's really driving this. And what's ironic is that a handful of the biologists and Project Coyote's Science Advisory Board have written studies that contradict the claims of these groups. The Commission claimed that contests are not in line with the North American model. I don't think that's a question that's actually been answered by the North American model. I reviewed the same technical review that Mr. Odenkirk mentioned at the Yuma meeting, and it just listed coyote hunting contests along with crow contests and one other I'm not familiar with, that these might be listed under challenges of the model. So it's a question that really hasn't been answered. The North American model says that science is the proper tool to discharge wildlife policy, and I think all sportsmen agree, and you've heard that time and time again, that we want science in this. We should not rush to decide without facts as to whether or not contests are an appropriate tool for wildlife management without evaluating this tool on its merits using science and data. I'm also especially concerned about using the public trust doctrine. The public trust doctrine is a body, like Mr. Odenkirk mentioned at the Yuma meeting, it's a body of law stating that wildlife is held in the trust by the government for the people. I think moving to ban legal hunting activities, predator hunting contests currently, without science, using the public trust doctrine, sets a dangerous precedent that wildlife management would be decided by the court of public opinion rather than by science, putting all legal hunting activities and fishing activities at risk.
Mr. Childs, we're out of time here. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your comments if you would.
I'm wrapping up, sir. I submitted some written documents for the commission to review, and I want to thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Well, and thank you for being here. All right, do we have any other requests, requests to address the commission on this? All right, Mr. Odenkirk, please proceed.
So yes, getting back to the recommendation, again, this is the start of the process, and so the recommendation is that the commission vote to approve the Article 3 Notice of Rulemaking Docket Opening and Notice of Proposed Rulemaking.
Okay, please go ahead. I'm sorry, so any other questions at this point? All right, so do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, but I want to caveat it with comments, if that's okay. So I'll make the motion. The department recommends the commission vote to approve the Article 3 Notice of Rulemaking Docket Opening and the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, which is, Mr. Odenkirk mentions, the beginning of the process. With that motion, first of all, I want to thank everyone that came and spoke today, and their viewpoints are legitimate and appropriate, and do appreciate their input. I think it also, though, is important to make sure that as we initiate this process, if the commission chooses to, that we understand that the proposed or draft rule that would now go to public comment in no way stops any person or group from predator hunting or calling. The proposed rule does not in any way stop anyone or a group from gathering to predator hunt, hold barbecues, campouts, auctions, dinners, whatever they choose to do. And the proposed rule in no way dismisses or alters science for the use, for the management of wildlife. And in the discussion of science, I think it's also important to note that the commission does have a responsibility and does, and as Jim Odenkirk mentioned earlier, regularly makes commission decisions, management decisions, policy decisions, both through a scientific lens but also through a social lens. That is part of what any commission in the past has done, this current commission does, and commissions in the future will do. So I think we've got to keep in context where this discussion's about, and Jim laid out the parameters of what the rule engagement would be about. But sometimes I know there's been some confusion about whether this has to do with the virtue or not virtue of predator hunting, and there's nobody up here that questions the need for predator hunting and the appropriateness of predator hunting as part of overall management tools. But we as a commission on a regular basis make decisions about bag limits. We make decisions about take violations and all kinds of things, all as part of a larger picture of the management of wildlife. And those things are informed scientifically and they are informed socially, those decisions are. And one of the most important things and one of the advantages Arizona has as a state is that this commission, as Jim pointed out, and future commissions and past commissions have been given a large amount of authority related to the management of wildlife. And one of the things that you never want to see happen, and we've all been to national meetings where we deal with commissioners that come from states where those policies are actually created and adapted in the legislative process or through the ballot box. Neither of those usually turn out well. And one of the benefits Arizona has is that the commission has been granted and given that authority. And the use of that authority has to and is part, has to deal with the social implications. Otherwise, social implications end up also becoming social implications at legislative bodies and or at the ballot box. And again, as I've stated, I can't think of very many good state wildlife management policies that have been made at the state legislative level or at the ballot box. One of the speakers previously brought up, rightfully so, the ban on trapping. If some of us remember when that issue came forth, the discussion was to the public was banning the use of steel-jawed traps, not the banning of trapping, but the way the language was written and ultimately approved, banned trapping on public lands. And so again, if the commission, it is a rightful role of the commission to examine these things, to question these things, as we should on all policies related to the management of wildlife. And so those are the reasons that I believe that we should move forward and have made a motion to open the rules package to have this process move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Odenkirk, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, second by Commissioner Sparks. Go ahead. Further discussion.
I also think it would help for everybody here to hear Mr. Odenkirk give you a time frame. In other words, today, if the commission approves the Article 3 notice of rulemaking, what happens, Mr. Odenkirk, and what's the timelines involved?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Sparks, I'll go back to the slide here, which indicates that if you approve the notice of proposed rulemaking and docket opening today, the department will submit that to the Secretary of State for filing in the Arizona Register, which will commence a public comment period beginning April 12th and extending to May 12th. And then a date to be determined, but will be published in that register notice. The commission will hold a second meeting in which it will have to decide whether to approve or reject the proposed rule. If it approves the proposed rule, and we're looking at sometime this summer in scheduling that meeting. At this point, it's just undetermined what that date is. If the rule is approved, then it goes to the Governor's Regulatory Review Council. They have a schedule in which we try to fit into that schedule, and depending on where we're at, it could take 6 to 9 weeks to complete that process. Once it is, if it is approved by GERC, then again it is submitted to the Secretary of State for publication, and state law requires that it can be effective no earlier than 60 days after that. So as I said earlier, the earliest that we could contemplate a rule being in effect, if the timeline is followed, it would be late November of this year. However, the commission would have the authority and discretion to establish a later effective date, as discussed, possibly January 1.
To that point, Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Davis?
Would I need in the motion at this point or not need to? I mean, for me, I would personally, if we go forward with a rule ultimately and go through that process, that it be effective January 1. Would that be now or later?
Yes, I think that's a good point, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Davis. To forward any delay by adding that at some point later in the process, I would recommend that you include that in your motion so that we can include that in the notice.
Second.
Amend my motion to establish January 1st.
January 1st. All right, thank you for that. Other questions or discussion? I'd just like to make a couple comments myself, and so this is a topic that's very near and dear to me as well. Predator hunting is something that I've done nearly my whole life. This is how I grew up. This is one of our family activities. This is something I enjoy doing quite a bit with my own boys, and quite often when I try to introduce somebody else, whether it's an adult or a kid, to hunting. Quite often we find ourselves out on a coyote stand and doing some predator calling, and I really enjoy this. I don't take this lightly. I don't take limiting our abilities to hunt here in Arizona lightly at all. The fact is, that's one of the main reasons I got involved in this commission, is because I do take that very seriously. I recognize the environment that we're in right now and how important it is that we protect this. I don't think that we can underestimate the impact or the possibility of what this public controversy that's threatening predator hunting could potentially do if we don't handle this. I also think it's very important, kind of echoing what Commissioner Davis said, I think it's vitally important that this body, the Arizona Game and Fish Commission, are the ones that make the decision on wildlife management in Arizona, and not somebody else doing that for us. What we're talking about here is a very, very limited scope and limitations on these contests. Speaking of the contest, I do believe that there's a solution here. That this is not an all or nothing, an all or nothing that we're going to get rid of predator hunting. I do not support that. I see the value in it, and I've shared with you my personal history with that. But the predator callers that I run with, these guys are very, very dedicated, very, very skilled hunters, and very, very dedicated. Kind of the hardcore hunters that I know are predator callers, and I don't know that if we got rid of contests that they're just going to throw up their hands and say, I'm done, we're not going to do this anymore. And John spoke about this a little bit, about some options. Some of these predator events, Mr. Odenkirk talked about, when you eliminate some of those elements of what the prohibition would be here, you eliminate those, well, then you're okay. These events, these social events where you get together and have predator calling events, or camps, somebody spoke about camps, I think those are great tools and great events that would not rise to, based upon the legal description, it wouldn't rise to being a prohibition. We could still go ahead and do that, and I would encourage that. So I don't believe that this is an all or nothing, that we're going to lose predator hunting, but I think it's vitally important that this commission take the most responsible step to make sure that we're protecting the predator hunting that we all enjoy doing so much. And so I just want to explain my vote on this, where I'm going to vote in favor of opening up this rulemaking. So, other comments, Commissioner Brake?
This is a difficult decision, as many of them are. I see this from a ranching standpoint, because predator groups have come to my rescue. A lot of those pronghorn antelope are sitting on my ranch down there, and they're there because of predator hunting groups coming out there and sending out the coyotes that prey on the fawns when they're born. I see it every day during that period. On the other hand, there's a social aspect, and I can't deny that. And so, part of me says, well, maybe I should vote negative on this, or should I vote positive? And then it comes to the conclusion, we don't even know what we're voting on yet. So the bottom line of it is, my vote will be yes. We should do this with the idea that during the process that you described, we'll get a better clarification, and maybe we can come up with something that's good for all of us, because I think we're all on the right page. We just don't quite know how to do it. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion? All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the Article 3 notice of docket opening and notice of proposed rulemaking. If there's no further discussion, we'll call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Odenkirk. And thank you, everybody that came and addressed the commission. Thank you. All right. Mr. Director.
Mr. Chairman, it's noon.
It's noon. Why don't we break for lunch? If we're back here at 1:30, is that?
That would be